Okay, it's a new week in our class, September 11th through the 16th, and we are talking this week about information seeking projects. And we're moving into our unit more on project-based learning, and there are assignments due. I'll show you that in a minute. So the barriers to learning with technology assignment, I have graded some, but not all of those, and I'll continue grading those throughout the day today on Monday, September 11th, and get them hopefully done by the end of today. So you should have those soon, but I've graded the discussions and everything else up to this point. Anyway, this week's activities. So you're going to read, and some readings will be in the textbook, chapter 4, pages 127 to 135, and then project-based learning, a primer. And again, these are all part of your read and pin assignment, so you could choose which one you want to pin on for the Pinterest board that we have each week, and read those. So those will help get you started on project-based learning a little bit more, or well, maybe not get started, but continuing on. There's going to be a discussion this week, and you are going to post on the Padlet page a link to a website featuring a quality information seeking project idea that you can find online. So again, you're going to try to find an information seeking project idea that is relevant to your current or desired position as a teacher, along with the link, and post steps that students follow in the information seeking project example that you linked. So link to the website, but also post on the Padlet page the steps that students might follow. And then it says remember to post by Wednesday this week, and when you have posted, also respond to at least 2 other students' posts. So let's take a look at this page real quick to see if we have anything yet. Yeah, it looks like we do have a few things here. There's a career research project that someone has posted. Looks like Emily has, and she has the steps overview: brainstorming, gathering, create, poster, oral presentation. And so it gives us the basic information for the project, and then we have the link that we can click on to view that a little bit more. And this was found, I guess, at the Pay Teachers site. So that's an example of the discussion for this week. You'll post about information seeking. And then, of course, we have our Tech Talk videos. A couple of people have provided those. Mariah and Quint have provided them for this week on IXL and Google Keep. And Google Keep was new to me, so that was good to hear about something that I hadn't heard of as well. But take a look at those, and you might be able to add those into your own toolbox for teaching and learning as well. So those are the activities for this week. But I do want to remind you that there is a project-based learning design due next week, and I want to introduce this for sure in more depth today. So here is the assignment, and you'll submit that in the Dropbox as you might have done with the barriers assignment as a graduate student. But this is for all students to complete. So for this project, you're going to choose an existing lesson plan that you have created and or taught to your students, and that you feel is not yet very effective. Your job is to add a technology element to this lesson and also make the lesson into a project-based learning experience instead. In the project-based learning experience that you create, make sure to support student information seeking and creativity in the plan. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to include these items. So create a project plan that you as a teacher could follow, in which students are required to find, evaluate, and use information about a subject, then use their creativity to express their knowledge. This assignment should include the following elements. There should be an original, unchanged lesson plan. Now, for those of you who might not be currently teaching, you might not have taught a lesson plan to a group of students yet. And that's okay to choose one that maybe you haven't taught to a group of students yet and transform it into a project-based plan. But for those of you who have taught that, you should be able to find a lesson plan out there. So you can maybe find an unchanged lesson plan that you haven't taught. Maybe you created it for a class before or some other experience. Or if there's one, if you can't find one like that that would work very well, you might actually be able to find one online, a lesson plan that someone else has created that you can then update and change into a project plan. So you're going to include the original unchanged lesson plan. You're going to include the new lesson plan with the title and summary, content, standards, objectives, description of learners including grade and subject, a list of materials and technologies used by the teacher and students, a list of the 9 project-based learning elements with a detailed description of how each is included in the project plan. So again, you're going to say anchor. The anchor for this project will be, the teacher will do this for the anchor, or however you want to put that, but make sure you use the word anchor so that I know that it's there. Then task, then directions, and so forth. So if you don't know what these all mean, I have a presentation from last week that's shared, and that shares these. So you should be able to know, as long as you've kept up on the videos, what all these are. So that's the different parts of the project. You also want to include an explanation of how information seeking and creativity are supported, and an explanation of how this experience overcomes the shortfalls of project-based learning, including all students gaining the target knowledge and skill. So that's a trick with project-based learning that we'll talk about, I think, in my video next week for sure. I'll introduce some of the problems with project-based learning and how can your project overcome some of those. It's what you need to think about. And then an assessment plan for the project. So this is how you'll be graded on that, but you can take a look at that in more depth on your own. And that will be due not at the end of this week, but at the end of next week. September 23rd is the last day that you can hand that in on time. So that's the project-based learning plan. Well, this week's topic is on information seeking. I did want to talk about some of the points that were given in the book that I thought were pretty good. So let's go to here and get started on information seeking projects. So as it mentions, with project-based learning, you almost always do some kind of information seeking as part of that experience. So students will have to seek information in some area, whether that's just looking back at the textbook, which would be a very not very in-depth way to do that, or if it was more than that, looking into sources of information, seeking out databases of information, and applying that to your project. But information seeking is generally a part of project-based learning. And as Doug Johnson in the book mentions, back in the day it was an information desert. There weren't a lot of sources of information. You couldn't find a lot of things. Just like in a desert, there's not a lot of variety of wildlife or plant life. It's sort of, there aren't a lot of things there. But in the jungle there are a lot of animals and plant life and all kinds of abundant things out there. And that's the way it is now. In the information age, we have an abundance of information, and there are tons of sources for students to go to. So that's what we're talking about. Back then, you had to, if you wanted to find a book on something, you had to go to the library, and you could look up find maybe one or two books on the subject, and that's about it. Maybe an encyclopedia as well. But now you have the web, you can go find a lot more. So anyway, one thing that's kind of important then is that back then, skills for finding information were important. Like, can you find the source of information about this topic? And sometimes you might not be able to, because there just weren't a lot of information sources available for an in-depth topic. But now, you have lots of information. You can find it pretty easily, and most students are pretty adept at finding things if they need to. So now we've switched to focus on evaluating information, because we know that there are abundant sources of information out there, but not all of those sources are quality sources, right? And so now we're concerned more with being able to evaluate the quality of information. And can my students really know that these are quality sources of information out there? So it talks about Big Six, the Big Six program, and this is a trademarked program, which I think is kind of funny, because it's just a common sense program, so I didn't know you could trademark common sense. But anyway, you're going to go through the Big Six process. That's a good way to think of the information finding process, and you can read about that on page 106. And also, any information seeking that you do with your students helps support their 21st century skills development in a variety of ways. So information jungle survival skills is what it talks about in the book. And the first one is know where you're going. In other words, students should, before they go out for a search, have an idea of what they want to search for and what they maybe don't want to search for. And make it hard to plagiarize with research questions. So the research questions that make it hard to plagiarize are specific and personal. Here's an example, Olympics of ancient Greece. You could have students find information about their favorite event or their favorite fun fact about Olympics of ancient Greece, but this question kind of helps students not to plagiarize. How would your favorite athlete do in the Olympics of ancient Greece? Let's say it's LeBron James, and students just love LeBron James and they want to see how he might do in the Olympics of ancient Greece. Well, they're going to have to do some more in-depth searching, and it's really hard to plagiarize that kind of knowledge because it's unique and interesting. So in other words, you could do a search for something like as broad as the Civil War, or the NASA Space Shuttle program, or the Great Gatsby. But you have to, with these different topics, you can make them a lot more specific by asking some more specific questions. And I guess that's the point of those is, for instance, the Great Gatsby, you don't just want a book report on what happened in the Great Gatsby. Maybe there's some unique thing that you can have them talk about, such as talking about maybe a friend who is similar to the characters in the Great Gatsby, or to a character in the Great Gatsby. Or with the NASA Space Shuttle program, maybe talk about what it would feel like to be on the space shuttle as it was launching forward. There's just ways to make these a little bit more creative and harder to plagiarize, I guess is the point there. Learn to stay on the main trail. So students should know a search engine, how to change search terms for desired results, and discriminate between relevant and irrelevant results. Those are hard skills to gain, but the only way they're going to gain it is if we give them a chance to. If we get them out there, try to search, try to explain the difference between the relevant terms for searching and also relevant results and irrelevant results. Learn to tell the good berries from the bad berries. In other words, reliable information sources. And this has to do with the quality of information that I talk about in other classes, such as, is the source current? Is it reliable? Does it have some authority? And what's its purpose and point of view? So current obviously means that it's recent or makes sense in its currency. Reliability means, does it cite sources? Does it tell you where the information that it found or is referring to is found? Or does it just make claims without backing any claims up? And that would not be reliable. Authority, who is responsible for the information source, and are they some kind of authority on the subject? And purpose and point of view, what is the purpose of this article, and is there any bias in the purpose or point of view of the article? Don't just gather sticks. In other words, students should organize information for importance and trends, determine the importance of different data choices, defend their choices, and offer conclusions and solutions to show insight and creativity, or advocate an action. In other words, they shouldn't just gather sources and say, this is what this source says, this is what this source says. Instead, they should maybe defend something or advocate an action with the research that they find. Learn to play the jungle drums. That means learn to work with technology as well and share your work with technology as a learner. And prepare for the next journey by learning from the last. It's good to have students reflect on the things that they've learned and maybe assess how well they've been doing in their journey and think about how they could do better the next time they go on their information-seeking journey. And so that's one of the things that I have that I just share about information-seeking projects. And I think I'll share a little bit more in another video here about assessment with project-based learning as well.